I knew that she had been there, right, for some person that I had been after for years. And then I don't know the result of it, but I knew that the work that we had done had been part of bringing that person down.
Hey Blazers, I'm Greg Barry and welcome to UAB Green and Told. Sometimes you only see pieces of the story, brief, unfinished, but they carry enough weight to keep you moving ahead. For years, life settled into a steady rhythm. Carpool lines, sideline chairs, afternoons that grew into evenings. A life shaped by showing up and staying close. And then somewhere inside that routine, something begins to shift. Heather McCalley doesn't arrive at the starting line. She appears in the turn, caught between what's familiar and what might still be waiting, learning early that starting over doesn't need permission.
But about the time my kids were, say, in middle school, I thought I want a different career when they graduate from high school. Say I have two daughters, and I started looking around on the UAB website. They could all take a class. I want to take another class. What can I find? And this was like 2006, and I stumbled across the computer science department website, which had a top 10 sort of David Letterman style. These are the reasons to get your master's in computer science at UAB. And it was all about career change, welcoming environment, the jobs that were going to be available in computers. And I'd always kind of had some sort of tangential link to computers through my family and friends. And I thought, maybe this would be interesting. So I emailed in 2006, I emailed John Johnstone, who's professor in computer science, and I said, look, I'm a 39-year-old Mountain Brook soccer mom. Could I do this? And he said, absolutely. And he said, come take a class, see how you like it. And I did that. So I had to take some prerequisites in the computer science department. I did that for about 3 semesters. And then there was a sort of a symposium where they had all the professors come and speak to all the computer science students saying, this is what I do in my lab. If you're interested in getting involved, let me know. And I was still early on in programming, didn't know much of anything. But Gary Warner spoke, and he talked about shutting down cybercrime and learning about computer security, which was not a major degree or anything at that time. And I was like, that's really compelling. And I understood what he was saying. And I wanted to go after the criminals too. And so the next day, I heard he loved coffee. And the next day, I show up at his office and was like, here's some Starbucks. What can I do? Teach me what can I learn? And he said, okay, here's a floppy disk. This tells you how long ago it was. Here's a floppy disk with a bunch of websites on it. And
Okay.
we think they are phishing websites. Tell me which ones are phishing websites just by visually looking at them. And then we'll send that information to the FBI. And a few months later, I got an email from the FBI saying, congratulations, you have submitted 10,000 phishing websites. And I was like, okay, so we need to get a computer to do this. Obviously, this is an easy task. I'm sitting in the room going, yes, no, copy, paste. And that was really where there were other students in the program by that time who were doing doctoral work to figure out an automated way to recognize a phishing website. So I worked as part of that. So after I finally entered the master's program, I became a graduate assistant in that computer forensics lab. And that is really where I found, my passion that ended up becoming a career.
So I don't want to say you kind of threw a dart and landed on computer science, but the way you described it of, hey, I found a website, I saw a cool looking thing that had a bunch of
Yeah.
David Letterman top 10. So you
Yeah.
almost threw a dart at that, or did you already have kind of a known, I kind of want to do this, so I'm going to look further?
I didn't really have a thought that much about computers. But what I saw on the top 10 list was, I thought, well, I could go to Sanford and take a class, or I could go to Birmingham Southern, try to take a class. But as an older person, like I said, I was the soccer mom. I would stick out there. But what I understood was I would be welcomed at UAB. There would be other people that I could, the sort of non-traditional students, people from all backgrounds. So I love the thought of that. And then I love the thought of this could lead to a career. And I also had done some stuff. So I had volunteered a lot with the junior league and had been involved in their newsletter, and all that was desktop publishing. So that was on a computer. And so I got more comfortable around computers, ended up becoming also like just the swim team mom that handled the computer for the swim team. So like all the results and stats and the printouts of the results and all that. So I was doing all these sort of computer related things, not programming, but I was becoming more comfortable with computers.
You started that journey about 20 years ago. You mentioned you were working with a floppy disk, which now today floppy disks,
Yeah, it was like a hard 3.5, 3.5 inch disc.
yeah, and they're not here really
No,
anymore.
no,
So you have seen technology change. You have seen the scams change over that time.
true, true.
Do you remember that first scam you looked at and went, okay, seriously?
Yeah, I mean, and really it was phishing. So it was websites that were made to look like bank websites or like PayPal or other payment websites that were on lookalike domain names typically. And yeah, and so many of them were, if you got that email, you would be like, obviously this is a scam. I'm not clicking on this. I don't even have a PayPal account or something. But over time, they definitely got more sophisticated. So yeah, I admit that in the early days of having AOL, I gave away my AOL password to somebody on the phone, even though every time you logged on, it said, do not give your password to anyone. But I don't know, that was early 2000s, maybe. And I remember calling them up and just being so embarrassed. Just yes, I know I wasn't supposed to get my password, and now now it's AI. So I'm like with AI, I'm like I have my head in the sand. I'm like an ostrich. I'm like I'm too old to figure it out. Don't bother me. So
At what point did you realize, you know what, I can make a career out of this? You mentioned that you kind of wanted to find something that you could parlay into something down the road. During your days at UAB, when did it really sink in that you could?
well, again, it was kind of working with Gary Warner,
Yeah.
and he had contacts just all over the world related to fighting fraud and scams and computer security. And so, really, my first job after working in the lab, because I worked half the time and I took classes half the time. So it was almost like a full time job there. But after that, even though he had these contacts all over, I didn't want to move away from Birmingham. So I ended up working with part time with two different companies. One that was from the Seattle area, but I worked remotely part time. And then I worked for another local company here that was more like a investigative consultant. So I kind of managed both of those working from home. I guess the way I knew was that here was a person that I got to know well, and he was willing to help me find a job, even though I wasn't willing to move. He's like, here, you can have a contact here. I'll introduce you to these people. You know these people from working with them in the lab. And there were some organizations that I was involved in that started when I was in school, including InfraGard, which is an FBI public-private information sharing partnership. There's a chapter here in Birmingham. And so this is where the FBI tries to partner with business leaders to get them to share information with the FBI so the FBI can build cases around bad activities. So I got involved in InfraGard, and that in that way I was able to meet a lot of other people from around Birmingham who were interested in cybersecurity.
You parlay this into a career working with different organizations, including Dark Tower, which you, I'm sure, work closely with Gary there as well. What kind of things did you set out to do? Did the soccer mom mentality say, okay, I want to look at these things because I know they're going to be affecting my children as they grow older and they enter college?
With respect to my children, what I had in mind was I want to set an example for my girls that you can have a career doing anything you want and you can do hard things and you could build interesting things. So that's kind of what I was out to show my children. Not so much like I'm going to get the phishing scammers so that my family doesn't get scammed. I get that. And there is, there are a lot of people who fight scams because, it happened to them or it happened to a loved one or it's happening to our elders. But for me, it was just more about having a career that I could be proud of and show my children. Now, professionally, I did enjoy building things. So one of the companies I was with was sort of spun out of stuff that had been built in the UAB lab, and that was called McCalley. We had an office over in the Innovation Depot for a couple of years until it was purchased by FishMe. But with McCalley, we were building tools that allowed companies that were being phished, so like big banks or big payment platforms, online services, to figure out which criminals were targeting them the most. So if they are sort of playing whack-a-mole and just trying to get rid of phishing pages one by one, that's not effective. They just pop up again and again.
Mhm.
But if you can help show them, and this is what our software did, we helped show them, say, well, there's 300 phishing websites targeting or spoofing your company this month, but 150 of them appear to have been created or built by the same person or gang, then we can throw our resources toward going after that gang. So I really enjoyed building that software, building the tools around that process a lot.
When you say throw our resources after that gang, how do you target them? How do you infiltrate and hopefully shut them down?
Yeah, I wouldn't say so much as infiltrating, but understanding what are the technical things that they're using to be able to, say, keep their phishing websites up longer, or in the vulnerabilities that they're using to be able to take over weak websites and put a phishing page on that website. We were always trying to push information to the FBI so they could investigate and actually send somebody, say, to Morocco and find the actual hacker or fraudster. But that was a multi-year process and not super effective. But the technical mitigations were a lot more effective.
When working on the software that you did, how long did it take to develop? I imagine it's not every week you're coming out with a new release because there's probably a lot that goes into it.
We were working on that for probably a couple of years at
Okay.
UAB, continually at Malcovery. And unfortunately, it was a little bit like you were coming out with updates almost every week or say every
Okay.
2 weeks because you were fixing problems while also saying, oh, well, there's this other little piece of information about phishing that we could add to our software. I would say, just in general, what the software would do would be to visit a phishing web page, download all of the files that it takes to create that phishing web page, and then compare that set of files to another known phishing web page to be able to say yes or no. But sometimes one little file might be, say, an old image that that bank used to use. And you could say, well, the only group of phishing sites that are using that old logo are the ones by this particular scammer that we know of that might be, in this other country typically. And so we could sort of flag that. And you might say, well, that is something you might call a sentinel file. So, like, when we see that, we know. And so being able to add that little feature to your software to say, okay, well, all of these big bank customer, all of these phishing websites that's our guy that we've been after. And so just always chasing the bad guy and being very diligent and looking for them to slip up Like sometimes they would leave their stolen information unprotected on a website, and we could go and we could find it, and we could say, wow, now we could tell the bank, well, these are your customers that became victims. And so now you know exactly what happened with these customers and why you had to, make their account good.
Did you ever get reports back to say, okay, these people were shut down because of what you did?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Yeah.
How satisfying was that?
It was super satisfying. Yeah. And so even after I left Fish Me and was working for Lumicare, I was still going to meetings like InfraGard and Secret Service Task Force and just other little groups around town. And I remember seeing this one FBI agent in the parking lot, and she had been sort of an old friend, and she said, hey, I know I haven't seen you in a long time, but I just want to tell you that I just got back from Morocco. I'm like, well, what more can you tell me? Nothing. But I knew that she had been there, right, for some person that I had been after for years. And then I don't know the result of it, but I knew that the work that we had done had been part of bringing that person down, or that group. Yes, it's very satisfying.
When you first entered everything back in the mid 2000s, around 2005, 2006, till now, how have the bad guys changed?
I mean, they're always staying a step ahead. In the early days of, it was probably 2008, 2009 when I sort of expanded from just, computer science to more computer security and
Yeah.
working on cybercrime. In those early days, the ransomware was primitive, and it was, a grandpa might be on his computer, a thing pops up and says all your pictures have been stolen, give us money or else you're going to lose all your pictures. That type of cybercrime evolved fairly quickly over the past few years and continues to evolve and got really, really big when I was at Dark Tower. And that was one of the big things that we were tracking at Dark Tower was ransomware and the different ransomware gangs that were stealing information from companies. So it went from just sort of mom and pop type, one off type things to where the criminals were saying, oh, well, let's go after this company specifically and send them an email, like a phishing email, and try to get specifically into their company. So it went from, sort of a broadcast. I'm going to send out a bunch of scary emails to random people as, a big spam campaign and see who bites, to I want to get this company because I know how they have secrets that I can steal, and then sell on the black market. Again, I have not kept up with AI, but I know that AI is being used by the criminals to be able to, once they've infiltrated a company system, the AI system will just go in and say, okay, this is what you want to find, this is what you want to grab. And instead of just them downloading everything that the company owns, they can more easily go in and find what's important and download that.
In your experience with everything that you've seen, are there tips and tricks that we can do as consumers to be vigilant and try to say, I use the term try because we can never say safe, but are there things we can do to help?
Yeah, I mean, still phishing emails come to people. You just always question every email that you get. Who is it from? Is it legitimate? Don't be clicking on the links in there. If something sounds too good, it's probably too good. If it's too good to be true. Just to be more careful and use your common sense. Use a unique password for everything. Use multi-factor authentication every chance you give for every account that you have. At a minimum where it has to send you something on a text message, but even better, use like a Google Authenticator or Microsoft Authenticator app just to protect yourself and your own accounts.
Considering you bounced around from here to there, do you think that I kind of know the answer to this? Would that youngster ever think that you would have been doing the cool things with cybersecurity that you were doing?
Not at all. Not at all. I mean, obviously, there was computer science offered in the mid 80s, and I took one computer science class, but yeah, no. It literally took UAB to be able to um, make me into that for sure. No, I never would have thought that I would be involved in computers.
Heather McCalley is a two-time College of Arts and Sciences grad who made a second career out of working in cybersecurity. Her path reminds us that momentum doesn't always arrive loudly. It builds quietly, decision by decision, until it carries you somewhere new. I'll leave you with Heather on what it means to be a Blazer.
To me, what it means to be a UAB alum means that I still have connections with smart people in the community, a place where big questions are getting answered, great scientific things are being worked on. Yeah, I mean, those are the things that are most important to me. UAB is a leader in our city, our state, our region, and my younger daughter went to med school at UAB. My husband still has a part time job at UAB. We love it.